When people argue about whether or not you should eat meat, the conversation usually falls into one of two camps. One side says meat is essential for health, and the other side says it's the root of all disease. But like most things in nutrition and life, the truth is somewhere in the middle, and it's a lot more nuanced than just meat good or meat bad. In this video, I want to walk you through the hidden pros and cons of eating meat, the kind of stuff that doesn't usually get mentioned in mainstream conversations. You'll see why I do recommend eating meat, but also why it's not something that you want to overdo or eat without thinking about balance. Let's start with some overlooked pros. Most people know that meat is a good source of protein and iron, but that's just scratching the surface. There are a few incredibly important nutrients that are either hard to get or not as effective to get from plant sources. And here's what you need to know. The first is zinc. Zinc is one of the most essential and most underappreciated trace minerals in the body. It's involved in immune function, hormone production, especially testosterone and progesterone, skin repair, and even neurotransmitter balance. It's also a key player in detox, especially because of its role in liver enzyme function and in supporting metallothionein, which is an important protein that helps bind and regulate heavy metals and things like copper. Now, while many plant foods do contain zinc, like legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds, they usually don't contain it in high enough amounts, and even more importantly, they often come with an unfavorable zinc to copper ratio. What that means is that they deliver a decent amount of copper, but not enough zinc to counterbalance it. Over time, especially on vegan or vegetarian diets, this imbalance can set the stage for copper overload, which is a condition where unbound copper builds up in tissues like the brain and liver, which then leads to things like anxiety, estrogen dominance, fatigue, and neurotransmitter imbalances. Meat, especially red meat, provides zinc in a very bioavailable form and without the excessive copper load. It helps push excess copper out of tissues and brings your mineral ratios back into balance, which is something that many people need today but aren't aware of because normal blood tests usually don't catch this imbalance. This is especially important because most symptoms of zinc deficiencies, such as low libido, weak immunity, skin issues, or feeling tired but wired, are often really a sign of a zinc-copper imbalance and not just a zinc deficiency. And if you're under chronic stress, then your body will burn through zinc even faster and retain more copper, and that just adds fuel to the fire. The next nutrient I want to talk about is preformed vitamin A. You probably heard that carrots and sweet potatoes are good sources of vitamin A, but that's technically not true. What they actually contain is beta-carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A, but not the active form that your body actually uses, so retinol. In order to benefit from it, your body has to first convert the beta-carotene into retinol. And for a lot of people, this conversion process is very inefficient. Genetics play a big role here because certain gene variants, like those affecting the BCMO1 enzyme, reduce the body's ability to make that conversion. On top of that, if your thyroid is sluggish or you're low in key nutrients like zinc or protein, then the conversion also becomes more limited. That's where animal foods come into play, especially the fatty cuts of meat or certain organ meats. These contain preformed vitamin A, which is already in the retinol form and ready to use for your body. This is very important because preformed vitamin A isn't just about eyesight or skin health. It's essential for producing ceruloplasmin, which is a copper-carrying protein that plays a big role in mineral balance. Ceruloplasmin doesn't just make copper usable, it also activates iron. And without enough vitamin A, you will probably end up with copper overload issues that I talked about before, and then a downstream effect of that will also be iron issues, because your iron also becomes biounavailable, so it's there in the body, but your cells can't really use it. This leads to a strange situation where someone appears to be deficient in iron based on their symptoms and maybe even their blood work, but actually has too much of it in an unusable form that's stuck in their tissues. A third benefit of meat that's often not talked about are sulfur-based amino acids. Sulfur is a very underrated nutrient. Your liver depends on it every single day to detoxify harmful substances and keep your body running smoothly. It plays a critical role in phase 2 liver detoxification, where toxic compounds that were activated in phase 1 are then chemically neutralized and made water soluble, so your body can safely eliminate them through your urine or your bile. Without enough sulfur, this step can stall, which leads partially processed toxins lingering in your system, which can be even more harmful than the original substance. What makes sulfur even more important is that it's not just about detox, it's also a key building block for glutathione, so your body's master antioxidant. Glutathione is made from 3 amino acids: cysteine, glycine, and glutamine, with cysteine, so the sulfur-containing amino acid, being the rate-limiting factor. If you don't have enough sulfur, you simply cannot make enough glutathione. And this means lower antioxidant defenses, slower recovery, and potentially more chronic inflammation. All sulfur-rich amino acids, so not just cysteine, but also methionine and taurine, are found in high amounts really just in animal products, especially meat, eggs, fish, and dairy. Now, it is technically true that plants contain all 9 essential amino acids, but the amount and the ratios also matter. Even though on paper most vegan meal plans aren't deficient in any amino acids, they are relatively low in sulfur amino acids, which can then lead to a backlog in liver function. Even skin conditions like acne, eczema, or slow wound healing can sometimes be traced back to poor sulfur status. A common sign that someone is low in sulfur is that they react very poorly to high sulfur foods like garlic, onions, or eggs. These reactions don't usually mean that you need to avoid all sulfur, unless it's a verified allergy, of course. In most cases, they mean that your body's actually starving for it, but struggling to process it due to low reserves, weak liver enzymes, or low cofactors. In these situations, reintroducing sulfur-rich animal proteins, even in small amounts, can make a huge difference. They give your body the raw materials it needs to restore glutathione, clear out stored toxins, and get your liver functioning properly again. Okay, with these 3 benefits to meat, let's also talk about potential cons that most people ignore. There are some well-known critiques of meat, like the concern over endotoxins in poor quality meat, which can trigger inflammation, or the presence of antibiotic residues and growth hormones in industrially raised animals, which can disrupt the microbiome over time. In this video, I want to talk about 2 more, with especially the second one being often ignored by many meat eaters. So the first one is the potential for acid overload in tissues. Meat contains sulfur, like we just said, but also phosphorus and nitrogen. And while these 3 nutrients are definitely essential for your body, and especially sulfur is often undereaten in many people, they are also acid forming during their metabolism. That means after digestion, they leave behind acidic byproducts that the body must neutralize to keep the pH of your blood and tissues stable. To do this, your body relies on bicarbonate, as well as a group of minerals called alkaline reserve minerals, primarily magnesium, calcium, potassium, and sodium. Now here's the problem. If you're not getting enough of these minerals through your diet, especially from vegetables, then your body has to make up the difference by pulling them out of internal storage. That means it will extract calcium from your bones, magnesium from your muscles, or potassium from your cells, just to maintain a safe pH. While this buffering system keeps you alive, over time it creates a silent drain on your mineral reserves. Eventually, this can lead to fatigue, muscle weakness, inflammation, poor recovery, brittle bones, and even hormonal imbalances. This will basically be downstream effects of the magnesium, sodium, potassium depletion that's going on. The takeaway here isn't that meat is bad, but that it needs to be balanced. The solution is usually to eat more cooked vegetables, which are naturally rich in those buffering minerals. Cooked greens, root vegetables, cruciferous plants like broccoli and cauliflower, and even herbs like parsley or basil will all help restore mineral reserves and keep your system in balance. I have an entire protocol on re-establishing acid-alkaline balance that I will link in the description. A diet that combines high-quality animal proteins with a good amount of mineral-rich plant foods is far more sustainable and protective in the long term than one that goes too far in either direction. So you don't need to give up meat, but you definitely need to pair it wisely with other foods. The second potential drawback is the risk of iron overload, even when your blood iron is low. This one is going to surprise a lot of people. You've probably been told that iron deficiency is extremely common and that if your blood tests show low iron or low ferritin levels, and the solution is to eat more red meat or take an iron supplement. Sounds logical, right? Well, not so fast. What most people don't realize is that your body only needs a very small amount of iron from external sources, usually just a few milligrams per day. The vast majority of your daily iron requirement is met through a process called the reticuloendothelial system. Basically, your body's built-in iron recycling system. It works by breaking down old red blood cells, which only live around 120 days, then extracting the iron from them and using that same iron to build new cells. It's a very brilliant system when it works properly. But here's the problem. If that recycling process is compromised, which can happen due to chronic inflammation, copper imbalance, or low ceruloplasmin levels, then your body struggles to mobilize the iron that it already has. This can cause iron to build up in tissues like the liver, brain, or joints, even while your blood tests show a deficiency. So ironically, you can have too much iron stored in the body and still get told that you're anemic based on your low serum iron or ferritin. Women are better protected from this than men because of their regular blood loss from their periods. And I'm also not saying that true deficiencies don't exist. But iron overload is a very big problem that's still not talked about enough. Excess iron is highly reactive and will drive oxidative stress, inflammation, and tissue damage. And taking in more iron through your diet or through supplements without addressing the root cause will just add more fuel to the fire. So that's why a diet very high in red meat can backfire. The extra iron gets absorbed into the bloodstream, but if your transport and recycling system is blocked, it will end up getting dumped in your tissues instead of being used efficiently. So if you're someone who has low iron markers and persistent fatigue, don't just assume that you're automatically iron deficient and just need to eat a bunch of steaks. It's crucial to figure out whether the issue is a true deficiency or a problem with your iron recycling system. I talk about this in more detail in a different video. Great, with all of these factors for and against meat, do I recommend you eat it? Yes, I absolutely recommend eating meat, but that doesn't mean you should be stuffing yourself with crazy amounts of meat every day. It's about quality, balance, and smart preparation. So here's what I recommend. First, eat red meat 2 to 3 times per week max. That's enough to cover your iron needs without running into iron overload. Like I mentioned earlier, your body recycles most of the iron that you need from old red blood cells, and only a few milligrams, sometimes just around 1 milligram, needs to come from your food. Next, balance your meat intake with plenty of cooked vegetables and other quality sources of alkaline reserve minerals. We already talked about why before. And 3, don't just stick to meat, but round out your protein intake with other high quality sources like eggs, which are also rich in sulfur, low mercury fish like sardines or wild salmon, and dairy if you tolerate it. On top of that, how you prepare your meat also matters, since many of the cancer-promoting compounds are dependent on the heat and cooking method. You want to use low and moist heat whenever possible, so steaming, boiling, and stewing instead of grilling and charring. Limit nitrate-rich processed meats and try to eat your meat with vegetables, not just because of the acid buffering effect we already talked about, but also because of the vitamin C in them. This helps block the formation of nitrosamines, which is another class of potentially carcinogenic compounds that are formed from the preservatives. And lastly, and this should go without saying, buy the highest quality meat that you can afford. So whenever possible, opt for pasture-raised or organic options just to reduce the exposure to antibiotics, hormones, and pesticide residue. At the end of the day, food is not just about protein, carbs, or fats. It's about micronutrients, cofactors, and biochemical balance. Meat can be an incredibly powerful tool in your health toolbox, but like any tool, it has to be used wisely. Cutting out meat entirely can leave you depleted in critical nutrients, even when these are technically also found in smaller amounts in plant foods. But overdoing meat isn't great either, so don't think of it as good or bad, and instead understand its nutrient profile and use that to your advantage. Also, don't forget to check out the video description for more free resources and my programs. They will help you if you're looking for step-by-step systems on topics such as holistic dieting, detox, and chronic fatigue recovery, and to avoid the most common mistakes that I see beginners make all the time. For more info, just open the description. It will all be listed there.